Hi, everyone. If Parsha Shmos were written today, it wouldn't open with whips and chains. It would open with bonuses, promotions, productivity charts, because the most dangerous slavery is not forced, it's chosen. And the most powerful bondage is the one that actually feels like success. You see, we live in a world that celebrates exhaustion. If you're not busy, you're lazy. If you're not reachable, you're irrelevant. If you're not producing, you're falling behind. And then Parsha Shmos walks in and quietly asks the question, are you building a life or are you just making bricks? Ours is a Parsha that tells the story of how a free, intelligent, spiritually rich people slowly became owned without noticing it happen. We know that the Jewish people were successful in the land of Egypt in Mitzrayim, so successful that we're told Shahayu Mitsuyanim ba, that they excelled in the Egyptian society. They were better at living the life in Mitzrayim than the Egyptians themselves did. Now, how did these intelligent, multifaceted, multicultural people allow themselves to become slaves to Paro in Mitzrayim? It just seems unfathomable. And what about the leaders? Did they even exist? By reading the text of our parsha, it sounds like the generation of Yosef died and the Jewish leadership was dormant until Moshe returned as an 80-year-old man. But it seems impossible to assume that any nation could survive that long without some leadership to hold their hands and protect them from the outside. Who was keeping the truck on the road? How was it being steered? And why did it take until Moshe's 80th birthday to get someone outed as a Jewish leader? Why is the leadership being hidden? There's an incredible comment that appears in many different forms in the Medrash, most succinctly here in our Parsha in the Medrash Hagadol that notes, Vayavidu Mitzrayim es b'nei Yisrael b'farech. Rav Elazar Omer b'parach, when the Torah tells us that Mitzrayim enslaved the Jewish people with backbreaking work, Rav Elazar notes that it began with a soft mouth. How so? The Medrash continues, Amru komishu osa levena no tel shekel kedei lefatoses Yisrael. The Egyptians offered a buyback program wherein anyone who made a brick would be paid in a shekel. 1 shekel equaled 1 brick. Now, the Jewish people, in order to make good on the deal, tired themselves out in order to get as much money as possible. So, what happened? They overdid it. That is, they all overdid their efforts and made hundreds and thousands of bricks to become very, very wealthy. Everyone, that is, says the Medrash, chutz me Amram, except for Amram. Amram, on the other hand, shalom nispata libo el ayoso levena b'chol yom. Amram didn't. Amram made enough to take care of his needs, 1 brick per day, and then he went home. Eventually, the Egyptians took the amounts that the people were able to produce for profit and turned it into a quota that became the slavery quota in the land of Egypt. In other words, the slavery became slavery because the people became attached to the rat race of life, enslaving themselves. Run as they would never make the quota of contentment. The desire to do so was a hopeless endeavor. Amram, who wasn't interested in that race, interpreted the message of bricklaying for people differently. The Rambam notes that it was Amram who received and taught sections of the Torah prior to the giving of the Torah to the people at Har Sinai. In essence, he fortified the internal walls of the Jewish soul brick by brick. He instituted the idea of using the time of Shabbos that was negotiated for the people as downtime to be dedicated to Torah study and reigniting the spark of hope within the Jewish soul and family, even in the decrepit, almost hopeless conditions in Mitzrayim. Remaining attached provided the people with hope, because it reminded the people where their salvation would come from and how they would survive the place even in the worst of times. Perhaps that's why Parsha Shmos needs to be read as a standalone Parsha. To paraphrase a comment I recently heard, life's not a television drama. Its challenges are not always solved within 51 minutes with 9 minutes for commercials. Yeshuos Hashem's salvation, also doesn't always come in neat 7 Aliyah packages to be solved in a single Shabbos. But even so, there's hope. And there's leadership and there's direction that we can hold on to that can help us weather the storm until we see the plan come together, as I'm sure it will. Lahagid baboker chazdecha vemunascha baleilos. Amram made a brick and earned his daily living. But by demonstrating to his family and people where their focus was to be, he gave them something much more important to hold on to. He gave them the hope and the strength to withstand the outside onslaught. He gave them the neshama, the nourishment that they so desperately needed. Parsha Shmos still ends in darkness. There are no plagues, no makos. There's no miracles. There's no sea splitting, just pain, pressure, and silence. And yet, beneath the surface, something sacred is happening. Homes continue to be built. That's miraculous. People and children were being taught. That's unbelievable. Shabbos was still protected. Torah was still being studied. The neshama was still being fed. Amram reminded us that even when Hashem seems hidden, Hashem is never absent. Even when the Geula seems to be invisible, it's already in motion. Amram teaches us that you don't defeat Mitzrayim by escaping it. You defeat Mitzrayim by outgrowing it, by building something that Paro can't touch. And that's our charge also, to guard one's spiritual non-negotiable in our day, to protect just one moment of Torah, perhaps, to go home emotionally and to be present there, not busy thinking about the business, not just physically being there, to use Shabbos, not just as a collapse, but as a resistance, while also to feed the neshama during the week, not just on holy days. To teach our children not only how to succeed, but how to stay Jewish and grounded and hopeful. Because slavery doesn't always look like chains. Sometimes it looks like schedules. Sometimes it looks like pressure. Sometimes it looks like just this once becoming this is our life. And by investing in what lasts, when everything else fades, Parsha Shmos reminds us that even in the deepest slavery, the Jewish people were never truly owned. Not by Egypt, not by time, not by pressure. Because a Jew who guards his neshama is already free. And sometimes the greatest act of faith is not waiting for redemption, but living like it will come, building and strengthening our Jewish homes brick by brick. Mitzrayim builds workers. Torah builds people. Paro makes bricks. Amram makes Jews. Paro builds pyramids. Jews build homes, families, and a united nation. And people, by the way, tend to outlast pyramids. And that's why one empire vanished. And our people are still here to talk about it, even until today, every single day. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.